Konichiwa. Welcome to Chocolate with Ed Garcia. I'm Ed Garcia. This is chocolate. The best part of Chocolate with Ed Garcia is eating chocolate with Ed Garcia at the same time. Let's have a simultaneous chew. Get your chocolate and let's eat it at the same time. Bring it near your mouth. Are you ready? Oishii, oishii. Strawberry chocolate, so delicious. All chocolate is good. Strawberry chocolate, dark chocolate, chocolate mint. Okay, let's have a simultaneous sip in honor of Scott Adams. Coffee with Scott Adams. Let's have coffee with Ed Garcia. Do you have a beverage? Okay, coffee, water, it's all good. 1, 2, 3, here we go. Simultaneous sip. Wonderful. Chocolate tastes better when you share it with a friend, and coffee tastes better when you share it with a friend. Okay, let's get to work. Chocolate with Ed Garcia. Yay! Speech number 5, restrictions. More accurately, avoiding restrictions. How do you avoid those bad restrictions? As you know, I'm a United States patent attorney. I'm a former United States patent examiner. And there's my email. All of this is my personal opinion. It is not legal advice because every application is a little bit different. Today is 21st of September, 2019. Here we go. Let's talk about miracles. About 1% or 2% of Japanese are Christians, and I was brought up as a Christian, so I like the Bible. It's very interesting, has good stories. And let's talk about miracles. Kiseki, right? Kiseki. This is the miracle of 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 breads and 2 fish. I'm not going to read it, but here's a very famous drawing, painting of Jesus and some of his apostles, his students. And here's a boy. The boy has 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. Okay? Japanese like fish, right? So that's one of the reasons I use this picture. Also, this drawing is very old, so the copyright is expired. So I don't have to pay money for this. We're going to talk about miracles a little bit later. Specifically, sometimes one application is restricted and then you might file a divisional application. So one application has magically, by a miracle, miraculously become 2 applications. The original application and a divisional application. It's a miracle, as you will see. On August 7, 2019, the United States Patent Office presented online a seminar, a virtual instructor-led training, 105 slides of PowerPoint, 4 hours. I cannot cover all of those things, so I'm going to provide this PowerPoint presentation as part of the materials that I hand out. And you can look at it for certain topics that I will not cover. Specifically, I will not cover species, I will not cover linking claims, and I will not cover rejoinder. I cannot cover everything in my speech. If you want more information, look at these PowerPoint slides. But I will cover some things that are not in the PowerPoint slide. Now, these are the topics I will cover. Topic 0. Remember 2:16, 2:16, 2:16. If you don't remember anything else, I want you to remember 2:16. Okay, you'll see why in a little while. Now, we will also discuss what is a restriction, when is restriction proper, what conditions must be satisfied to apply a restriction. We're going to discuss elections, traversals, and petitions. We're going to discuss examiner game theory. We're going to discuss some examples of when a restriction may be applied, and we're going to have conclusions, especially about how to avoid restrictions. You do not want restrictions. You do not want to do things that will cause the examiner to restrict you. Here we go. 0. Remember 216. 216. 216. Let's start with the maximum number of claims that you can have for free claims in a United States patent application, and that is 320. 320. You can have 3 independent claims, 20 total claims for free. No additional cost. No excess claim fees, okay? No excess claim fees. Now, the average in a U.S. patent application is 2.5 independent claims, and the average is a total of 17 claims. Now, why is that important? It's important because 216. If you use 2 independent claims or less and 16 total claims or less, then you will be below the average, okay? If you are below the average, then there is a below average chance that the examiner will restrict you, okay? I don't like restrictions. To avoid restrictions, one of the things that I do is 216. I stay below the average, okay? So you do not forget, I'm going to repeat it. 216, 216, 216, 216, 216, and 216. Remember, 216. Okay, what is a restriction? A restriction is the practice of requiring an applicant to elect a single claimed invention for examination. I'm going to say it again. Restriction is requiring an applicant to elect a single claimed invention for examination. When is restriction proper? 2 conditions must be satisfied. 1, the inventions are either independent or distinct. Let me show you what an independent invention is. My glasses and this pen are independent. They have nothing to do with each other. They have nothing to do with each other. We'll discuss that in more detail. And we will also discuss distinct inventions in more detail in a little while. Now, second condition is showing that there would be a serious search and examination burden. Burden means like work on the examiner if restriction is not required. In other words, undue burden is the phrase that the examiners use. Undue burden. A burden that's not reasonable. Too much work. Let's put it in simple English. Undue burden, too much work, unreasonable amount of work. You're paying the patent office a certain amount of money. You can't expect an infinite amount of work. You can only expect a reasonable amount of work. Now, a restriction requirement is made at the discretion of the examiner. The examiner decides whether to restrict or not restrict. The patent office does not mind if the examiner makes no restriction. He examines 100 claims with 20 distinct inventions. The patent office thinks that's acceptable. But the examiner does not like that, so he may restrict. Now, if the examiner restricts, the applicant may traverse, say, no, and may petition to the Office of Petitions. We'll discuss those procedures later. Now, listen. The Patent Office says in slide 5 of its PowerPoint presentation that a restriction is not a tool for reducing the number of claims for mere convenience. This is on slide 5 of that PowerPoint presentation. And let me tell you, they're lying to you. That's not true. Of course, restrictions are used to reduce the number of claims. But the examiner is not allowed to say this, right? That's just the way the patent office rolls. We'll discuss this in more detail later. But the examiner will never write too many claims, therefore I'm restricting. Why doesn't he write that? Because he's not allowed to write that. Okay, definitions. Okay, independent inventions are unrelated in design and unrelated in operation and unrelated in effect. For example, my glasses and this pen, they are unrelated in all three of those things. They're unrelated in design, unrelated in operation, unrelated in effect. Nothing to do with each other. But that's never the issue. So let's forget about independent claims. Let's concentrate on distinct claims. Distinct claims are distinct inventions are claimed inventions that are related in at least one of design or operation or effect. And let's look at one. These two cash registers. One of them is electronic, right? It does the addition electronically. And the other one is mechanical. This one does the addition using gears. When you press this button down, it turns a gear. This is a mechanical cash register. Now, the funny thing is, most of you, young people, have never seen a mechanical cash register. Now they're antiques, and they're probably very valuable. If you have one and you want to get rid of it, talk to me. I'll take it off your hands. But, okay, so these are related in effect, right? They add numbers, both of them, but they're distinct if found not connected in at least one of design, operation, or effect. So in the operation, this one is electrical, and this one is not electrical, this one is mechanical. So these two inventions are related, but not connected in at least one of design, operation, or effect. So they're distinct. In other words, they're slightly different. So, if two claimed inventions are distinct, that's the first thing, first condition. The second condition is that they cause an undue burden on the examiner. So now let's talk about the undue burden. Undue burden. Too much work. That is what an undue burden is. An unreasonable amount of work. So the Patent Office defines undue burden as when one of these three conditions is satisfied. At least one of these three conditions. A. Separate classification. The first invention or the first embodiment is in class, for example, class 703.4. The second embodiment is in class 703.5. Okay, slightly different classes. Actually, slightly different subclasses. Class 703.4, class 703.5. So that's separate classification. So the examiner in the old days would have to look in this class, in this box, a physical box with printed patents in it, 703.4, but for embodiment number 2, he would have to go search in another box, 703.5. So it was actually a physical increase in the work that he must do. Now electronically, it's not with electronic searching, it's not so such a burden to search in different classes. B, separate status in the art. I've never seen this one applied. Let's not worry about it. Or C, a different field of search. And this is defined in an interesting way. Look at the part that I bolded. Employing different search queries even though the inventions are classified together. So different search queries. So when you're searching by terms, you would search a different term. term A, term B, and term C for the first embodiment, term A, term B, and some different term Q for embodiment 2, right? So different searches. So this is the easiest of the undue burdens to satisfy. C, a different field of search. .3. Restriction is not proper. So when is restriction not proper? When can the applicant traverse a restriction, argue against a restriction successfully? And the answer is, of course, when, for example, no serious burden exists, right? The second condition is not satisfied of satisfying a restriction. There is no serious burden. There is no undue burden. So it's easy, just easy to search both of these claimed inventions, embodiment 1 and embodiment 2. Or the inventions are not distinct as claimed. Usually they're distinct. This one is difficult to win. The next one is there is an express admission by the applicant, either in the specification or as part of a traversal, that the claimed inventions would have been obvious over each other. In other words, if the examiner can reasonably reject the first embodiment, then the applicant has admitted already that the second embodiment is obvious and therefore not patentable. And the reverse also, if the examiner can reasonably reject the second embodiment, then the first embodiment, the first claimed invention, is admittedly obvious over the second embodiment. In other words, the examiner can just reject either embodiment, and the applicant has already admitted that the other embodiment would be obvious. So the examiner only has to reject one of the two embodiments in order to reject all of the claims. I've never seen this admission done, but it's interesting. And then the last is the applicant may argue that the claims, the two claimed inventions, define the same essential characteristics of a single disclosed embodiment. So this is very similar to the green one here. Same essential characteristics. That's almost the same, almost, not quite the same as admitting that each one would be obvious in view of the other. It's a little bit safer to use this last one, that the claims define the same essential characteristics. All right, let's continue. Now, election traversal petition. So, after a restriction, the applicant must elect one of the inventions. Usually the first one, the one that includes claim 1, although there are dangers to that. You really, if you're thinking, that's what's usually done. Usually the applicant or the applicant's attorney elects the invention that includes claim 1. However, sometimes that's not the right answer, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, now, after election, the applicant may file a divisional application claiming the unelected invention. So he may file a divisional application for embodiment number 2. So there was one application, the original application, and after a restriction there might be another application, the divisional application. There was one and now there's 2. It's a miracle. It's similar to the miracle of the fish, right? There was one, now there's 2. There was only 2 fish and now there's enough fish to feed everybody. It's a miracle. Kind of. Now there's a procedural advantage to the divisional applications, which is that the examiner cannot hit you with a double patenting rejection against the divisional application with respect to the original application. So there's one small good thing. Now, if you do not agree with the restriction, you can traverse the restriction. You can argue against the restriction. If you argue against the restriction, you must provide an argument. You can't just say, I traverse, and then expect the examiner to do something else. You have to traverse and give reasons for your traversal. If you give what they call a mere traversal, or a bald traversal, or a traversal with no arguments, then the examiner just says that. He says, it's a mere traversal with no arguments. I'm going to ignore it. I already made my restriction. I have nothing else to say. Continuing. When you traverse, you may also call, one way to traverse is by telephone, to have an interview. And you may also want to speak with the supervisor if the traversal is very bad. Whenever I have interviews, I always consider requesting that the supervisor attend the interview. Continuing, if the traversal is rejected by the examiner says your traversal with arguments, is not persuasive, non-persuasive, then I'm going to maintain my restriction. After that happens, and only after that happens, you can petition to the Office of Petitions. Again, or you can call the examiner and or the supervisor. It's usually faster to bring the supervisor in than to file a petition, and usually costs less, and the supervisors are generally pretty reasonable. If you're going to win, if your argument is good enough to win in the Office of Petitions, then your argument is probably good enough to win with the supervisor. Let's talk about examiner game theory. I'm an examiner and I know the games that they play. You know, we're all human beings. We all play a game. Life is a game. We need to know what the rules are. So if you understand the game that the examiner is playing, beyond the MPEP, beyond the manual patent examination procedures, right? There's more to it. There are things going on that are not discussed in the MPEP, not in the manual. But let's talk about some game theory. So, up to 4 hours of non-examination time are provided to the examiner for writing a restriction. That's not written anywhere in the manual in the MPEP, right? But it's true. So, if you recall my speech number 4 about patent examiners, you know that examiners love non-examination time, because non-examination time means that they get paid without having to produce. They don't have to produce any counts for this non-exam time. It's wonderful. Non-examination time is very valuable to the examiner, and 4 hours is half of a day. That's very reasonable to write a restriction. Now, the restriction reduces the undue burden, the number of inventions, and the number of claims, secret, and the number of claims that the examiner must examine. And now, after a restriction, the applicant may file a divisional application. Miracle! Kiseki, it's a miracle. One application became 2 applications. It's very good. It's a miracle for the patent examiner. The first time when I was a patent examiner and I learned about restrictions and divisional applications, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was the miracle of the fish, where 2 fish fed many people. So one application now can feed many patent examiners. It's very funny when you're a patent examiner. It's not funny when you're an applicant and you get restricted. Now, if the applicant traverses with a good argument, then the examiner may withdraw the restriction. But here's the game. The examiner keeps the 4 hours. Remember, he got paid 4 hours for writing a restriction? So even if he withdraws the restriction, he keeps his 4 hours. Similarly, if the applicant traverses and the examiner denies, then the applicant may petition. If the applicant petitions and the petition is granted, and the examiner must withdraw his restriction, well, in that case, again, the examiner keeps his 4 hours. So restrictions are very nice. So for these reasons, many examiners have really become experts on restrictions. They can do them quickly, get their 4 hours, and they never lose the 4 hours. And maybe they reduce the number of inventions they have to examine, they can reduce the number of claims they have to examine, and maybe they create a divisional application. There was one application, now there's two. It's a miracle. The miracle of restrictions. All right, let's talk about government fees, in particular the term excess claims. Excess, too many. If there are too many claims, then you must pay the Patent Office additional money. You must pay them excess claim fees, right? So 330 is the maximum number of independent claims is 3, and the maximum number of total claims is 20. So up to 3 independent claims are free, up to 20 total claims are free. One excess independent claim is very expensive, $420. One excess total claim is $80. So for example, let's consider a 421 application. It has 4 independent claims and a total of 21 claims. You must pay $420 for the excess independent claim plus $80 for the excess total claims. Total is $500. Of that $500, the examiner receives $0. $0. He is well aware that the Patent Office is charging you excess claim fees of $500 in this situation, and he is well aware that he is being paid $0. So he knows that it's going to be relatively easy for him to write a restriction, even if he cannot say the words excess claims. I'm restricting you because there are excess claims. No, he can't say that. He has to give one of the other reasons we previously discussed. The inventions are distinct, well, they're almost always distinct, and there's undue burden. So the argument is always about undue burden. Now remember, the Patent Office in its PowerPoint presentation, slide 5, says restriction is not a tool for reducing the number of claims for mere convenience. Well, the Patent Office says that, but on the other hand, the Patent Office charges you $80 for that 21st claim. Okay, so the Patent Office uses the term excess claims, and it should not be surprised, and it is not surprising if the examiner applies a similar logic to considering that excess claims should be carefully examined regarding whether they cause an undue burden. Right? If they're burdensome enough for the Patent Office to charge you excess claim fees, then there's a very good chance that the examiner will consider them an undue burden. Now there are some other factors to consider, but let's look at this claim tree. Here is a 114, one independent claim with 14 total claims, and notice the way the tree is set up. This is really the most common way that I've seen claim trees set up, drawn. There's many other ways to do it, but I think this is the best way, and it's actually the most common way too. So notice claim 1 over here is circled, so it's an independent claim, right? We circle the independent claims. And then, so that's first level. Second level claims are 2, 8, 12, 14. Third level, 3, 6, 4, etc. Fourth level. So there are 4 levels of claims here. And everything is very nicely done. 2 from 1, 3 from 2, 4 from 2, 5 from 4, etc., etc., etc. Working our way towards the right. This is very neat, very clean, very nicely done. Now, there are some other factors that we should consider, and let me rephrase that. There are some other factors that the examiner will consider, even though they are not in the MPEP. They are not in the Manual of Patent Examination Procedures. However, trust me, the examiner will consider these because they're very important, even if he does not write them down as part of his restriction. Trust me, these are factors that he considers. So, excess number of claims, right? If you're paying money to the Patent Office, the examiner is well aware of that. Number of pages. So the examiner is making his claim tree, and let's say he finds 9 pages of claims. He's making the claim tree Page 1, page 2, oh man, page 3, page 4, my gosh, page 5, oh, you kidding me, page 6, what, page 7, page 8, page 9, 9 pages of claims. That's a lot of pages of claims. That's a lot of work, okay? Without even considering the official theoretical legal reasons for determining that there is an undue burden. If you have 9 pages of claims, it's probably an undue burden. Although the examiner will never write that down. What else? Bad title, okay? If you have a bad title, for example, working machine, the examiner knows one of 2 things. Number 1, that you, or whoever signed this thing and submitted it to the patent office, the patent attorney of record, either does not know what the rules are regarding titles, or, equally bad, maybe even worse, does not care. Just does not care. Who signed this thing, right? Who signed this and submitted it to the patent office? Either someone that does not know or someone that does not care. So this bad title does not help the examiner, it does not help the applicant, it does not help the public. It's a bad title. It's non-descriptive, and the examiner may, should, and in this case did, require a new title. So you're forcing the examiner to tell you to do your job. All right, the examiners, by providing a bad title, you're trying to force the examiner to write a good title, which really is something you should do. In this case, the examiner did recommend a new title. He made a suggestion. So let's keep going. No parts list, no explanation of reference characters. So if you have 5 pages of complex mechanical drawings and you do not have a list of reference characters, you're forcing the examiner to do a lot of work. So he's looking at figure 3, there's part 74. He's trying to figure out what is the name of part 74. And there's no explanation of reference characters. There's no parts list. So he has to look through the pages trying to find 74. Now, he can optical character recognize the specification, right? The patent examiner has access to the specification only as an image, only as a PDF, portable document format file, right? He does not have access to it as a text file. So he must perform, and I've done this many times, perform optical character recognition to so that he can search it. So that he can search, for example, for reference character 27. Now, what if there's reference character 9? If he's searching for reference character 9, he hits paragraph 9, paragraph 19, paragraph 99, page number 9. It's very difficult to search for reference character 9. That's one of the problems with single-digit reference characters. I think probably my next speech will discuss reference characters. That would be speech 6, reference characters. All right, so you want a list, an explanation of reference characters or a parts list. And if you do not have it, that creates extra work for the examiner. He does not like it, and a lot of work. By the way, having a parts list also reduces the errors that the person writing the application makes. It really does. It reduces errors for many reasons. So the examiner, when he sees no parts list, not only does this create extra work for him, but it's also an indication of low quality. It's a predictor, let me rephrase it, a predictor, oh yeah, an indication, a predictor of low quality, a predictor of errors that are caused commonly when there's no parts list. Sloppy claim dependency, I'll show you that in the next slide. Unclear or indefinite claims such as correspondence relationships. As you may know, very few U.S. applications do this, unless they're translated from Japanese applications. There is a trend that I see more and more for Japanese applications to use something they call correspondence relationships. So they'll write their claims using words that are not in the specification. For example, and sometimes they'll put in a paragraph explaining what the new words correspond to. So for example, here we have the correspondence paragraph says, switch lever 34 corresponds to switch operation portion. Okay, what does correspondence mean? What it means is that the claim uses this term, switch operation portion, but the specification uses this term. Well, now that creates at a minimum confusion. Do these mean the same thing? I don't know. Do they mean different things? Do different words have different meanings? Generally, in claims, different words have different meanings. So if you are intentionally avoiding using the word switch lever and you're using the word switch operating portion, how are these terms different? And the answer is, I don't know. The right answer is this term is indefinite because the term correspondence is not defined. All right? So a good examiner will probably reject this term as indefinite, and that's exactly what happened in this application. So when an examiner sees that the application is going to play this correspondence game before writing the claims, he knows it's going to create additional work, at a minimum, probably create indefiniteness, and here's the interesting part, and probably cause errors. There's a very good chance that the applicant, when he starts to play this game of correspondence relationships, will cause an error. Many ways to cause an error. For example, instead of switch operating portion, the applicant might only write operating portion. What happened to switch operating portion? Is operating portion the same as switch operating portion? I don't know. Actually, it's an error. This kind of error is caused because the applicant spent 15 pages saying switch lever. He knows what a switch lever is, and now he starts writing claims. He wants to use a different term, and he forgot it was switch operating portion, and he writes operating portion. I think that's what may have happened. So causes problems, causes errors. Doing this correspondence relationships game by the applicant often causes errors by the applicant. So it's predictive. The examiner sees this and he can predict that there's a higher chance of errors. He interprets this correspondence relationships game as an indicator of low quality, and therefore as a reason to hit the applicant with a restriction. This is predictive. Now, none of this is in the MPEP. None of this is in the PowerPoint slide that the Patent Office, 105 pages, forgot to mention all of these reasons that the examiner will consider when deciding whether or not to hit you with a restriction. All of these things affect the amount of work that the examiner must do. And the examiner sees these things before even reading Claim 1. The examiner decides to make a restriction before he knows what official reason he will use to support his restriction. All right, here we have the same claim tree, 1 through 14, but with additional claims. Now I promised you that I would talk to you about sloppy claim trees. Look at Claim 15 here, coming from Claim 2. Now before, when we were adding claims, we were adding down or to the right? Claim 8, then we added Claim 9 from 8, then we added Claim 10 from 8, Claim 11 from 10, Claim 12 from 1, 13 from 12, 14 from 1, 15 from 2. How are we going to get to Claim 2? Well, we can draw a line over to here, or we can draw a line this way to the left. Now notice Claim 2. Claim 2 now has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 depending from it, and Claims 15 and 16. This is sloppy claim drafting. It tends to cause errors. It tends to cause errors by the person writing the claims, And it may also cause errors for the patent examiner. It's an unnecessary complication, right? This sloppy claim drafting, it just causes problems. So, yeah. So let's consider this now. We have 423, 4 independent claims, 23 total claims, which gives us 1 excess independent claim, $420, 3 excess claims, 3 excess total claims, 3 times 80 equals 240, 420 plus 240, $660 in excess claim fees you must pay if you file this U.S. patent application, okay? You got to pay the U.S. patent application fees plus $660 for excess claims. Excess. Consider that word carefully. Excess. Too much. It's too much. We're going to charge you extra for it. And remember, the examiner does not receive any of this money. So the examiner hates excess claims. Hates them. And in this case, this example, we also have sloppy claim tree, we have a bad title, we have no parts list, we have a correspondence relationships paragraphs, a correspondence relationship paragraph, and the examiner, without ever reading any of the claims, knows he's going to restrict you. So I see these things and I estimate before I read the office action, 95% chance of restriction. Okay? I don't need to read the office action. I don't need to read the claims. I look at these factors, Garcia factors, and I know the examiner is going to restrict. All of these things cause work. Look, we got excess claims that the patent office is charging money for, right? We got sloppy claim tree, bad title, no parts list, correspondence relationships paragraph, and we have 95% chance of restriction. This is going to be restricted. When you file this application, you know, not only you know, 2 things. 1, it's not going to be allowed, all right? And 2, it's not even going to be examined. It's not going to be examined. You're going to receive a restriction. Your examination is going to be delayed by 4 months, 6 months. There's going to be a delay. So let's continue. What is the total cost of a restriction? A restriction causes some cash expenses. Now you can always abandon, right? That's always a possibility. But very few applicants abandon after a restriction. They want to at least see a rejection. So it causes some expenses, some cash expenses, and also some non-cash expenses. In fact, the non-cash expenses may be, equal to or greater than the cash expenses. So let's consider. In this example we're discussing, we previously paid $660 in excess claims, and then we received a restriction, a 15-way restriction. We made an election, 1, 2, 3, 15, and we paid the U.S. patent attorney $420 for filing that election. We paid the Japanese patent attorney, for example, about $300. The client, the applicant, spends some time reading things, writing things. Now he's not paying cash for that, but it's consuming some of his time. Maybe he can't sleep that night. Oh my gosh, I was restricted. Oh, I'm so sad. I can't sleep. And then there is loss of life. Consider, the restriction was sent March 4th. The rejection was sent August 21. So the change, almost a 6-month delay, 5.5 months, almost 6 months. If there was no restriction, the rejection would have been sent March 4th. So this restriction caused us a 6-month delay, which means that if we receive a patent, probably the patent will not have as long of a life. The patent may have a life of, for example, 16.5 years instead of 17 years. We lost half a year of patent life. Now, that has value. It's not cash, but it does have value. What is the value of a month of a patent life? And without getting into the detailed calculations, I estimate between $50 and $100 per month. So let's use $50 times 6 months, $300 of value lost. It's a non-cash loss, that's true, but you've lost 6 months of life of any patent that comes from this due to the restriction. Again, that's a non-cash expense. Similarly, the excess claims were that cash has already been spent, and nonetheless, we should consider it, I think, in this calculation, because we can avoid those excess claims. We should avoid the excess claims and the excess claim fees and the increased chance of restriction caused by filing excess claims. Okay, don't file excess claims. It's generally not a good idea, almost never a good idea. So anyway, this total here is $1,680. We do include some non-cash expenses, but you get the idea, right? At a minimum, the cash expense is $420 plus $300, that's $720. $720 cash expense, really roughly times 2 for total cost, considering some of the non-cash expenses. Additionally, 19 claims were withdrawn. Now we only have 1 independent and 4 total. Plus, possibly, we have to file a divisional application for the second embodiment, if we want the second embodiment. We were too greedy. We wanted to get too much. We tried to grab too much. We tried to make the examiner work too much. We tried to put an undue burden on the examiner. Okay? It was not reasonable. And because of this, the examiner restricted us. Now let me show you something here. An interesting way of thinking about this. We have an expression in the United States called poking the bear. So there's a bear, and the bear is a big animal, right? And sometimes children or adults will take a stick and poke the bear. Just give him a little poke to try to get him to do something. He's just standing there, and the child is bored and pokes the bear with the stick just to get some reaction. Well, you poke the bear, nothing happens. You ha 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 ha. You poke the bear again. He goes, oh, that was fun. You poke the bear again, and maybe he gets very mad and chases you and bites you, right? So, poking the bear can be entertaining, but it can also be very dangerous. So let's consider the examiner to be similar to a bear. Now, let's poke the examiner. Let's give him 1 excess independent claim. Well, you know the examiner does not like excess independent claims. They cause a lot of work. Ow, ow, you're poking the examiner. Arr. Now, what about excess total claims? 3 of them, not 1, 3 of them. Poke, poke, poke. The examiner knows you're spending $660. He knows exactly how much money you're spending for excess claim fees. And even just the word excess, he knows there's excess claims. Well, what could be a better reason for giving you a restriction than you filing excess claims and giving that money to the patent office and none of it to him? You know, and the patent office knows, that you're filing excess claims. Too many. You're filing too many claims. So you're poking the examiner, and then you give him a sloppy claim tree. All right? You're causing additional work for the examiner, and probably you might be, let me rephrase that. There's definitely a higher chance of you having errors, antecedent errors, for example, and logic errors in your claiming. This due to this complex and sloppy, inefficient claim tree. Okay? It's a sign of doing things quick, and it's an indication of problems, a higher probability of problems coming, a higher probability of work. So, sloppy claim tree, poke, 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 poke the examiner. You might not even have realized that you have a sloppy claim tree, but if you drew your claim tree, then you know it's sloppy. You know, you got to here, and you came all the way back to here. You know that's not good, but you didn't want to spend time renumbering your claims. Sloppy claim tree, poke, poke, poke. Bad title, poke, poke, poke. Mr. Examiner, here's a bad title, working machine. I, the applicant, I do not care if it's a non-descriptive title. I know it doesn't help me, the patent attorney writing the application. It does not help the applicant to keep track of which inventions are associated with which application. But somebody, some United States registered patent attorney, signed the filing, the application data sheet to file this application with a bad title. So, at a minimum, the U.S. patent attorney knew or should have known that this was a bad title, non-descriptive title. Okay? Poke the examiner. In this case, the examiner required the applicant to file, to provide a new title. In fact, the examiner in this case suggested a new title. So here you are, you're the applicant, and you're telling the examiner, I, the applicant, I don't know what the good title is. I'm too lazy to write a good title. You, examiner, you do the work. You restrict. You require me to write a new title if it's important to you, because I don't care. In fact, I hope that you, the examiner, suggest the title. It saves me the trouble. Well, the examiner suggested the title as part of his restriction. Oh, yeah. Poke the bear with the bad title. No parts list. Maybe the applicant even had a parts list. Some applicants will delete the parts list because it's not required by the U.S. Patent Office. But it certainly helps the examiner. If there's no parts list, the examiner interprets that as, one, you're making him do more work. Two, you're have an increased chance of error. And the worst, this correspondence paragraph. Poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear. Rawr! This bear bit the applicant with a restriction requirement. All right? That's what happens. You poke the bear enough times, poke, 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 the bear will attack. Maybe one poke you can escape, right? If you have a very well-written application, no sloppy claim tree, a good title, you provide a parts list, you don't do this correspondence paragraph, you're helping the examiner with a very clearly written and clearly claimed application, well, the examiner may accept a few extra claims, right? All right, so conclusions. Avoid excess claim fees. They are a red flag that you may be restricted. You're paying cash for excess claims that may never be examined and that may trigger, that may cause a restriction. At a minimum, they are a factor in the examiner deciding to restrict you. They are a poke of the bear. Examiners like 216. 2 independent claims or less is below the average, right? Below the average of 2.5. 16 claims or less is below the average of 17. When the examiner gets a new application, one of the first things he does is see how many claims there are. Are there 50 claims? Are there 5 claims? Just to get an idea of how much work this application is going to be. If you give him 16 claims, the first thing the examiner is going to say is, good, all right, nice, all right, I like that, all right? In contrast, when you give the examiner a bad title, a non-descriptive title, the first word out of the examiner's mouth is a bad word, a curse word, okay? Don't poke the bear. So, avoid indicia. Indicia is plural for indications. Avoid indications of low quality. Don't poke the bear. Don't provide a bad title, a non-descriptive title. Don't provide no parts list, okay? Include the parts list. Include a list of reference characters, explanation of reference characters. It will help everybody. It will help you, the person writing the application. It helps the examiner. It helps the whatever attorney reviews the rejection, because he needs to figure out what's going on, and it helps the public at a later date after the application is issued and published. And let's do one more thing. This is a new idea that I have. If there are 15 original claims and you want to add 5 new claims, then first cancel 5 claims. See what I'm saying? You got 15 originals and you want to add some new claims. Well, don't add 5 claims and jack it all the way up to 20 total claims. No. First, or at the same time, cancel 5 claims and add your 5. See, so you tell the examiner, look, examiner, I know you're busy and you have a lot of work, and I have new claims, so I'm going to help you by canceling some of the old claims. All right? So the total remains 15. Even better, cancel 6 claims and add 5. So now the total is 14. The examiner appreciates that. He's like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to enter the claims. I'm not going to restrict the claims and refuse to enter them, which he can do. All right? Don't poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. And 216. This is the end of Chocolate with Ed Garcia. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it was educational and entertaining at the same time. This was Speech 5, Restrictions. More clearly, avoiding restrictions. Avoid restrictions. You don't want them. Follow my advice in how to avoid them. 216, and don't poke the bear. This was the best speech ever. The best speech ever. I'm going to say it for a third time so that you remember. This was the best speech ever. Yes, it was. Now, at the request of one audience member named Koki-san, I'm using paintings. These are wood prints of Mount Fuji instead of the red Japanese flag. This is painting or wood print number 5 from a book of wood prints of Mount Fuji. There's Mount Fuji, and this is called Fuji Seen from the Mishima Pass. So there's Mount Fuji. Here's a very nice Japanese house. There's a Japanese farmer carrying some green Japanese plants. And here's another farmer carrying, looks like a hoe for digging. And here's some other Japanese carrying things on their back, coming down the pass, the Mishima Pass. And this Japanese guy here, he's looking at Mount Fuji. Yes, he is. Thank you. 日本が大好きです。ありがとうございます。さようなら。